Hey Sam,
Hi, Zach.
how you doing, buddy?
Zach, I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I'm doing good. I want to be the first to officially congratulate you, Sam,
Mm.
on surviving the first episode. I suppose we're officially on to episode 2, which is pretty
They
cool.
they told us we couldn't do it, but we made it
We
somehow.
persevered. Yeah, yeah. It's what an interesting experience. I'm so happy that we decided to do this, and I feel like we had such an engaging chat. Maybe the most intellectually challenging and interesting chat I've had with somebody in some time.
Mm.
I can't even remember. And like I said last week, I don't really have these conversations. So it was, I mean, I ended up watching the recording all the way through 2 times, an hour and 40 minutes, um, just to kind of see how we did and look for things to improve upon. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
What was your take? How did we do? Give us a rating, 1 to 10. How you feeling
Oh
about it?
boy. Well,
Hard six?
I think you could disagree on where we would fall in that rating in terms of the content that we produced. I think we're above a 6. I think we might be a 6.5.
I'll take it.
But in terms of how do I feel about it, I mean, I'm at a 10. I
There you
mean,
go.
honestly, I have really been looking forward to getting the recording back going and starting another episode with you. Um, it's it definitely kind of scratched that itch that I wanted to try to solve, which is not having an outlet to talk about things.
Sure.
So, how have
No,
you felt about it?
it's been good. Admittedly, there's that little moment when it got posted to the good book, and all of a sudden both our names are attached to it, and all of a sudden now tons and tons of people, some of which I don't even converse with anymore, even though we're friends on Facebook,
Yeah,
now had access to it. So there's that moment of like, I won't say crippling anxiety, but a moment of like, well, I feel like I did it fine, and I only rambled a little bit, which is pretty good for me. But
yeah,
no, it was good. It was nice. Is kind of chatting about last time. I have outlets in some regard to this about having conversations like this, but it's usually with my thumbs texting, and
yeah.
it's very rarely. I know obviously we can't be truly face to face, but as close as you can be face to face in the way times are right now. And Yeah, no, it was good. It's been a while also since I've had kind of like a intellectually engaging conversation where I couldn't go, okay, I don't need to respond to this text for 10 minutes. I'll go think about what I want to do. Or like,
Yeah,
I've seemed like I knew what I was talking about, but now I'm going to go look up an article real quick to confirm my bias.
right, right.
It's been a while to actually have like a conversation like that. So it was nice. It's reaccessing a part of my brain that I don't use as often as I'd like to.
Hmm.
So
I
it's nice for that.
I found the fact that we were trying to really focus on being articulate and respectful. I found that that really helped me. The times that I do talk to people about this, it's pretty much always confrontational because
Sure.
people pick their sides. They're trying to disprove everything you're saying. They're cutting each other off.
Yeah.
It's just really refreshing to have a conversation where that's not happening, where
Yeah.
you can talk about your side and I can really kind of think about it. And since you're given a little more freedom to talk longer than maybe you would in one of these normal confrontations, I can really consider your points and try to think about what I want to say in
No,
response.
and absolutely, and I think it's again kind of a one-on-one conversation. I notice sometimes at least, and it could just be my groups of friends and such, but I'll have kind of group conversations again, usually via text. And Theatrics play a big part into it. It feels like almost like I understand when I'm like in these group threads having these conversations, what it's like to be a true pundit, because it's just like
Mm,
how much of what we're saying actually is what we think, and how much of it is just like, let's just make this a show. Let's add in this extra. Let's make our take as spicy as possible.
yeah,
Let's just take this to a new level. Let's just be devil's advocate for the sake of being devil's advocate, which has some value now and again. But it's also why can't this just be having a conversation like, oh, let's express our opinions and chat about it without it just being like, oh, I'm going to take this time you use the wrong word right here and only focus on that and make it this big thing.
Right.
And it's nice just to have this good one-on-one conversation to actually be able to kind of like truly, again, maybe because I'm being filmed and it's being thrown out into the ether, make you a little bit more mindful of yourself. And take down those little theatrical parts of it, just actually just let it breathe and let it, kind of wash over you and think about it a little bit more. I think that's important.
So I don't know about you, but I had a number of people reach out, whether publicly through where we posted it or privately, friends and family. And the one thing that I did ask when I posted it was if people have comments, please be respectful. And everybody was, maybe that's a testament to our friends and family. I don't know. But I really received nothing but encouragement, which I think is so important, when you're talking about putting yourself out there in a new avenue, this is certainly, I think, for both of us. It's very scary. We talked about that last week a little bit. And just getting that little bit of positive, reinforcement, I guess, I think it goes a long way. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who did that. And honestly, I had a couple things that I did not expect to get that kind of started maybe a much longer conversation. Conversations that I had not had with some people. And that's exactly what I was hoping to gain from this, is
absolutely
to learn more about folks and get their sides and connect with people, something that I think historically bad at doing. And in the past, I've always just written that off and said, well, whatever, this is just who I am. But I don't think that has to be the case. So, yeah.
No, I totally agree. And all the feedback I received has been positive. A lot of people, I admit, didn't know this was happening. So they're like, where did this come from? Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, we just kind of chatting with my buddy Zach, and it just kind of turned into something where, just kind of see where it goes. And, this is only episode 2. So obviously we are growing and learning. And we'll cultivate our on-air personalities as we go along.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm ready for you to do some impressions pretty soon.
Don't give me a little time, little Sam Caliendo coming out. But it's been fun and it's been exciting. My dad engaged with me right away, who I talked about him, and I was just like, hey, Dad, we're going to chat about it. Like, I hope I represented you okay, because I definitely talked about you for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And such like that, and friends saying that they're interested in chatting and, wanting to not only just have those kind of conversations between us normally, but also already clamoring to be those first special guests here on the Sam Zach podcast. So
who knows where it will go, but we can't reveal too much too soon.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So just a couple maybe housekeeping things. I guess the feedback that we did receive, pretty much everybody said, hey, like, this was just too long for me to consume. We went for an hour and 40 minutes last time, and for sure agree. I really enjoy that long form.
Sure.
But, I'm the kind of person that I'll throw it on my second monitor because I never leave my house because I'm quarantined and I work from home. So I have multiple monitors. I do something else. But obviously that's not everybody's situation. So what we're going to try to do here is we're going to try to do this in 2 parts. The first part is going to be focused more on, I don't know, anything that is not specifically current events that we might want to talk about, whether that be political theory or, different parts of economics that don't necessarily relate to what's going on in the world right now. Really, whatever we might want to talk about. And then the second part, we're going to try to look at some current events, pull up some specific articles, and talk about issues that we see in the world. And those will be 2 separate pieces of content. So hopefully, if you don't have the time or willingness to sit through almost 2 hours of a YouTube video, maybe splitting it up will be a little bit better. And then hopefully I'm also going to cut up some of those clips into further shorter, little between 5 and 15 minute things for where we talk about very specific things, and then that'll be maybe a good thing to link to, or if you want to get a couple get an idea of what we were talking about in that episode and determine if you might want to commit the time to listening to the whole thing. So we're going to try a couple things. Like Sam was saying, we really don't know what we're doing. We're just kind of throwing some stuff out there. The feedback is very valuable, I would say. So we got our first YouTube comments from my mother.
It's a great start.
We'll
great
see where it goes. So, okay. So I think we've probably chatted enough about that. Let's get into some more interesting things here. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's this thing floating around the internet called the political compass. I've seen a number of people take this test, pundits and different people, and it kind of scores you on different dimensions of politics and kind of tells you somewhat where you lie. So I'm going to flip over to that and let's talk about it. So Sam and I both took this. This is a political compass. I'll provide the link to this down below in the description if this is something you'd be interested in taking for yourself. But essentially, you have this little box here, and you are plotted within this graph somewhere between left and right, authoritarian and libertarian. So I don't know, Sam, have you seen this before? I typically have not. Everyone's familiar with the left and right kind of x-axis here, but also adding this other vertical authoritarian libertarian thing. What do you think about that?
I thought it was. I have not, to answer your initial question. No, I have not actually seen anything like this. It was kind of interesting because, for me at least, initially, and I mentioned this a little bit last time, libertarian already has its own little, like, the words authoritarian and libertarian have very very buzzwordy, I mean to say.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I think of a libertarian, I think of a very, very specific type of political person. And when the scale was, I'm either going to be more libertarian and more authoritarian, I'm just like, well, I don't particularly want to be either of those things. But then again, when I'm thinking about it from that viewpoint of, if you're looking at the libertarian viewpoint of just being like a greater sense of liberty, less government, from that, well, liberty meaning less government control, more, personal liberty stuff, like which you talked about pretty heavily in the first episode.
Yeah.
And then authoritarian being just the placeholder word again for, well, it's not even necessarily communist, but like, a dictatorial type government system, giving as much power over to the government as possible. Authoritarian implies to me very, very, very negative, which I thought again was kind of a strange thing, because it's not necessarily. I don't think if someone was way up high on the authoritarian, because I think the government should control more, that necessarily means from the viewpoint of like a despot. So like that buzzworthiness kind of threw me for a minute, but it's I don't know. It was interesting to see, because as you go further on, which I'm sure you'll get to, it kind of shows like plotting of political figures where they'd fall upon that.
Yeah. Well, so
you want to stick with that for a second.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah, just for a second. Typically what I see a lot of times when I hear commentators on the political right talk about authoritarianism, it's very much associated with the left-hand side of this scale, which I guess makes sense. If you're a conservative pundit, you're probably trying to paint the political left in this authoritarian, nightmare kind of.
The mouse and tongues of the world.
Exactly. But, one thing that I thought of, which is interesting, typically, I think the easy approach to this, to looking at the scale, is saying, okay, well, if you take out the y-axis, all the way on the left is like a Marxist, communist kind of government, and all the way on the right, there might be some disagreement. Some people say just total anarchy. Some people say fascism, which is interesting to me. I've heard of, again, considering kind of where I fall on this, I listen to a lot of folks that maybe identify more as conservative. There's a gentleman named Dinesh D'Souza who is very much a conservative pundit. He has a lot of strong views on a lot of issues. Not all of them that I agree with.
Very true.
And this is not an endorsement of him. I'm just saying
Sure.
I
Yeah.
like to watch different folks and get different takes. And
Mhm.
I watched a video of him talking about fascism specifically and how he was making an argument that it's not of the right; it always came from the left. It seems to me, as we'll see on the scale, I think that's why this is so interesting. Is adding the authoritarian element seems to solve a lot of that for me, at least the questions that I have, because whether you're talking about full-blown communism or fascism, they're both highly authoritarian. And so there's
Sure.
adding this extra
Yeah.
extra element when you talk about, so it plots, let's see, does it plot? Yeah. So here you've got Stalin, on the left, very authoritarian. Hitler, past the right-hand side into the fascism world, also extremely authoritarian. And I think this website even says if you take the economics out of it, Hitler and Stalin are probably agreeing on a lot of things.
Sure.
So that was a really interesting piece for me to see. Also, I would note Milton Friedman. So this is somebody who I stumbled across a few years ago after never having heard of Milton Friedman, and I've really grown to enjoy listening to what he says. He's long passed away now, but he was a 20th century economist, and I think I find him to be a very interesting person to listen to, along with Thomas Sowell, who is still alive. I believe he's a fellow, maybe even at Stanford, if I remember correctly. But these are economists that are certainly on the political right. But I really enjoy both of their commentary, listening to how they explain different parts of economics, whether you agree or disagree. I think they're both worthy people to at least consider their arguments.
Well, is there something then kind of with a Friedman or a Soul or something like that kind of particularly sticks out to you right now about, maybe even after, obviously we haven't shown where we plotted yet,
Yeah.
so people might have been able to guess just upon knowing us for the first episode. But is there something about Friedman in particular, something seeing where he is in the plot and knowing that you've read and listened to things he's talked about that really jumps out at you about in regard to that?
Yeah, and let me preface this by saying this: I vastly prefer consuming video media,
Sure.
maybe to my detriment. I really don't read a lot of books. I have not read any of Friedman's works.
Sure.
I have been exposed to his
haven't
ideas through YouTube videos of him speaking in the 70s. I would say the same is true of Thomas Sowell. But he's still alive. He still gives interviews every now and then, and I find him to be a really illuminating figure to listen to. Thomas Sowell, interestingly, was a Marxist, a self-identified Marxist when he was a teenager, and then he ended up studying under Milton Friedman and kind of transitioned his way to more towards the right. Anyway, one thing that sticks out to me, they have a lot to say on pretty much any modern issue, whether you're talking about minimum wage or healthcare or really any of those things. One thing that sticks out to me from Sowell is he has this I guess I want to call it a bit. It's not a bit. It's a economic, I guess, theory or argument. But he says, he has this thing that he calls 3 questions for the left, which is when looking at any economic proposal or, something, piece of policy that, a more left-leaning politician might want to implement. He says he has these 3 questions, which is, see if I can remember them, but he basically says, compared to what? So like, what are you suggesting compared to what is the alternative type of deal? And then how much is it going to cost? Right. So like, what is the actual cost of this economically speaking? And then the third one is, what hard evidence do you have that this is going to work? And so that's sort of, and I hope I'm doing any amount of justice to what he has said, but that's something that I've heard him say before that has sort of spoke to me, because it's sort of setting things up in a way that feels more like fact-based instead of knee-jerk reaction-based. I think the common critique of policies on the left is that we're trying to do things that feel good. We think maybe the intentions are in the right place, maybe they're not, but we're trying to institute policies because they feel good, because they might be popular, and that we're not really considering what the actual impact of them is from an economic standpoint. Like if you raise the minimum wage, are you actually helping the people who you're intending to help, or are you causing other kind of unseen effects? And I don't want to talk about minimum wage specifically right now.
No,
we want to move on.
Yeah, no,
that's an example.
It's interesting. I mean, again, I admit I have not read any of Soul. I will say, as a person, which is probably kind of funnily enough falling in line kind of what you're saying, as a person who's definitely considers himself a very liberal person, I have not spent a lot of time studying economic theory. So with that, which is probably how a lot of maybe conservative or right-leaning people, Republicans and such, however, whichever category you'd like to throw yourself in there, would probably think is pretty common amongst liberal-leaning, left-leaning people. And I guess I'm one of those in some regard. So that's interesting, though. I don't know, again, if those are your words or Soul's words a little bit. I do find it fun that sometimes that it's often considered like the phrase of being like, the policies, especially from an economic standpoint, is about making ourselves feel good, as opposed to the intention being we want to help and we think that this will be helpful to as many people as possible, which I'm not going to deny that there might be some people who are looking at it from the viewpoint of being like, it'll make me feel better knowing that I'm giving money to someone who needs it, in my eyes, quote unquote. But I don't know. I think the words of things that feel good, as opposed, I don't think that's the way I would describe my thoughts about, economic policies on the left. I'd be more about like thinking of policies that can help support as many people as possible in a world and system that isn't built to support as many people as possible.
Right.
And
what you're saying there is a very John Stuart Mill ideology. He has a book called literally just utilitarianism, which is about.
Yes, I know that. That's what I know.
You're a philosopher, Sam. I appreciate that about you.
I got that one.
Yeah. One other point I want to make before we continue is I think if there's another overarching theme that I get from Friedman and Soul, it's this idea of limited government, which is thinking about the idea of what is the role of government in a society, just from a theoretical point of view. What are the things the government actually is supposed to take care of? We talked a little bit last week about the social contract, weighing your personal liberties with giving more power to the state, and we all sort of live in this world, which I agree with. But I think determining where to draw that line, I think, is an interesting discussion. One thing I would say, just from my own experience, I mentioned last week that I'm a programmer. I work in over a few jobs that I've had in that industry. I've worked with local and federal government agencies, and the overarching theme that I get is highly, highly incompetent between the people that I interact with, and specifically on the technical side, the solutions that they have are really abysmal based on modern day technological standards. And that's purely my opinion, but that sort of, and maybe this is a blind spot for me because I see things like that reinforces what I already maybe want to feel about limited government. And so it makes me question, like, what should the government actually be doing, And it makes me highly suspect of turning over control of large parts of our life to a government body and just hoping that they do a good job. But I don't know that that's necessarily reality in terms of the way that I see it or present it either. I'm definitely skewed on that one.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're going to dive into what the purpose of government is right now.
No, not necessarily.
Because let's
save that.
It's a multi-episode conversation.
Let's move on. Let's move on instead of getting in the weeds. But I think these are interesting things to discuss.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go right to the results. So here is the results of Sam and I's test. From listening to us, you can probably figure out which one is which. Sam is on the left and I'm on the right, both in the picture and on the scale.
Nice.
My initial reaction to this, Sam, was just both how far down both of us are on the y-axis, on the towards the libertarian bend. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Well, I will say, just for those who, if you do decide to take the test, you'll see it when you do it. It was just to give a little context. Basically, it asks us somewhere, I want to say there's 6 different pages, 6 different topics of questions, ranging from like 6 to 12 questions per topic. So we'll just round about and say that we asked about 60 questions. And each question was, you ranked it either strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree. So that doesn't allow a lot of nuance, I will say. And I struggle with those kind of tests, admittedly. It's like, do I actually strongly agree? Is that 85%? That kind of stuff. It would have been I wish there was like a 1 to 10 scale and truly allow for that nuance in it to like see how much this would have changed my opinion on it. Because I think I'm probably a little bit lower on the y-axis than I think I would normally say I would be.
Gotcha.
But again, that's basically questions. But I was surprised by that. There was a lot of the stuff. I think, knowing me, and I think I might have mentioned this to you off air, but I think the thing that really skewed it a lot for me was questions about. There's a lot of questions about religion, and a lot of questions about like sex and sexuality and things like that. And with sex and sexuality, basically, I think I said, probably, if I remember the questionings right, basically strongly disagree with just about everything. Or maybe it's the other way around, strongly agree. It was one of the two. I felt basically the same way about everything, because it was just like, should the government, basically, should they have anything to do with anything that's going on with a person's, life sexually? And then the other one was kind of also in the same regard, was just like with the religion stuff. I mean, openly, I am not a religious person. I'm an atheist, and it's, so like basically with that across the board, I was just like, absolutely not. This should not be involved in anything. This should be out of people's lives. They shouldn't have to, have it in their day to day. So I think those 2 topics alone just dragged me straight down that y-axis.
Gotcha.
Which I thought was interesting. So I mean, kind of seeing where I'm overall plotted, it makes sense. Like if I had been in any other quadrant than where I'm in, I would have been dumbfounded. This is kind of based upon this, where it's at. But in some ways, I'm actually kind of surprised I'm not further to the left. I would have expected to be closer to the left and higher up than lower down and more in the center of the left. So yeah, I'm trying to think. I wish I had the topics right in front of me. But it was an interesting test for me. I did it twice. And I think in my second go around, I moved about half a block to the left.
Gotcha.
About a third of a block up. So, I mean, I'm pretty much, I guess, according to this test, where I'm supposed to be.
Gotcha.
It was interesting. I admit, though, there was a part of me initially from our conversations, though now I think more about it. I think where you're at is about where I'd expect you to be. But I mean, initially, I actually thought you would be. I'm surprised I'm further down the y-axis than you are. And I'm actually mildly surprised that you're more centrist in it than I also was anticipating. And this is not meant in any way a negative judgment or anything like that, but it's just like, I was more surprised by your scores even more than I was mine, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, my initial response, I sort of looked at it and I didn't really know what to think. I thought that maybe I didn't know. Maybe I should do it again like you're doing and see if I have any material difference. I definitely agree with you on the questions. One of the things the website says is, don't read into the questions too much. Yeah. Don't try to overthink it. Just trying to get a basic understanding. I'm definitely the type of person to overthink things. So sure. I tried to, hold off in that regard. But the more I thought about it, I think I probably am pretty close to there anyway. Like I mentioned last week, I certainly have a lot of conservative views on a great number of topics, but I also have some more liberal views. And then certainly, I think you raised the best point, which is where we are compared to each other on the y-axis. That you're even farther down than I was. So yeah, I mean, and maybe that sort of contributes to why I feel a little bit maybe orphaned politically, is that I mean, I certainly do not feel a strong, uh, I don't know, calling to the Republican Party per se, and this sort of confirms that, and that I may be more centrist than I would have even thought in my own head. So it's
Sure.
interesting,
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
results.
No, it really was. And I think the other part again with these kind of tests also is like and this is like a psychology thing. So I'm not a psychologist, but there is a part of me that knows when I do these tests that no matter what, somehow these answers are going to be shared. Whether that's, hey, look, I took this test. You very rarely do something like this and don't at least like send the link to a family friend
Mm.
or a buddy or a mom, whatever. And then also knowing that this was going to be on here. This is why I did it twice, being like, all right, I'm not overthinking it, but I'm also like, do I actually strongly agree, or do I like want
Yeah,
to say I strongly agree?
right.
And so it's always, I feel like like now I'm like interested to see like all my other friends and family, like when I usually compare myself to where I would say, like I've got a few friends in mind who I'm like, oh, they're going to be all the way to the left, and they're going to be all the way down to they're going to be in the bottom left hand corner, and like I'd love to see them take that test now, because I'm like, all right, like how do I view myself in comparison to these other people who I've always like, well, I always thought I was super liberal, but I'm not as liberal as that person.
Yeah,
And kind of like see that, which is again, as I said, I was actually surprised that we're not as far away from each other really as I thought we were end up being. So it'd be interesting now to see other people who I thought I was closer to. Maybe I'm further away from them than I thought I was,
yeah.
which I think is pretty interesting. That's kind of thing.
I think just having the data presented in this format almost makes me think that the more important dimension is the y-axis. I mean, obviously, left-right is so polarized, and that's what gets all the play. But you know, I knew that I was not going to be in the authoritarian bent, and further than that, I'm very suspect of policies that I might interpret are going down the authoritarian road.
Totally.
And I really like how they provided examples of where different historical figures kind of fall on this. One that we didn't talk about that they mention, I believe, is let me flip over to it. I think it's General Pinochet. Is that how you say it? From I think
Pinochet.
Pinochet. Is that Peru? Do you know?
No, it's
Or
Chile.
Chile. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he says, he's basically sanctioning mass killing for the sake of the free market, which is an interesting thing to think about. But so I mean, that's like that sounds so ridiculous to me. But I mean, that is a logical conclusion of going so far right if you have that authoritarian bent where you don't put a value on individual liberty. And I think so that sort of matches up with what I was talking about last week. And I think that I feel comfortable in that realm of saying that, I really believe that a focus on liberty is highly important.
Yeah.
And especially, I mean, nobody wants to be anywhere close to Hitler and Stalin up here, but I mean, it's the authoritarian side of this that really scares me, I think.
And again, and maybe this is just my mindset in general. But like when I doing the test a second time and perhaps spending a little bit longer thinking about each question than maybe they intended me to, but also knowing I'd already sent you this original one and being like, that's what I'm going to hold it as my standard bearer, but then wanting just to kind of think more about it. I don't even know how. I mean, let me just rephrase it. I don't know a person who I would feel like I could imagine would be above, it would be north of the, it would be high, it would be on the authoritarian side in any capacity, maybe like just over it. Like, I'm just like looking at some of the questions that would be geared towards authoritarian, and I'm just like, I don't think I know people who think like this, but maybe now I'm just sending my bias that I'm like, if you answered a certain way to this question, I don't know if I'd want to be your friend, which is so I'm interested to see now. I say this now, I'm going to like, my dad's gonna be like, I'm an authoritarian. But it was interesting. I mean, again, I'd love these tests. Are enjoyable. I mean, they're more fun, I think, than necessarily telling. But it is interesting. Like, I'd love to, there has to be a test. And if somebody knows it, please share it. in the comments or anything like that, or with us, behind the scenes. But I'd love to see one that's even a little bit more like truly like what is the EFJ thing? What is that? The Myers Briggs or whatever.
The personality test.
There has to be something similar to that from like a political standpoint, where we're talking like hundreds of questions with way more nuance to it. I think that would be something. Maybe we'll do a little research and see if something like that. Because there's times, again, with these with these 4 options things, where I feel like I always end up forcing myself towards a picture of myself.
Yeah.
And because I'm just like, I can't, if you said strongly agree with this, I would be so appalled by you that I have to say strongly disagree, even if I'm not necessarily strongly disagree. Right. I feel more about my opposite answer, feel more strongly about the opposite answer than maybe even like my actual answer. And maybe this is a psychological thing about me, maybe, guilt or something. I don't know. But sorry, I didn't mean to get off topic a little bit with that.
No, I think
was
it's great.
My interesting interpretation about that whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to try. So, like I said, I'll have the link down below if anybody wants to give this a shot themselves, and let us know, maybe where you fall. What do you think about this? Does the test mark you pretty much where you think you should be? Or I'm interested as well to hear people's opinions on adding this y-axis. I haven't seen it be presented in this manner before, which I almost think is a shame. I mean, if we can come to agree that this is a reasonable thing, I feel like you would want to know where you fall on here, but I don't know. I find it most of all interesting that I've never come across anybody talking about adding this y-axis in here outside of when I saw other people take this specific test. So anyway, for what it's worth, that's where Sam and I fall. Here's our results one more time. So
if you're an authoritarian, we can still be friends. We just might have to chat about some things.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Hey, I think I'm with you on that one. Okay, so for the rest of this little first segment here, I know that we said we're not really going to be talking about current events in this particular one, and I'm not going to reference any specific article or anything like that. But we did just want to chat a little bit about George Floyd specifically and the state of the world in the last month or so, specifically in regards to Black Lives Matter or some of those things. We maybe tried to get into it last week, and Sam and I actually had some more content queued up last week that we were going to talk about, and we just didn't get to it. And I think that's primarily a result of us just being unfamiliar with maybe the format and understanding how much time things take. But at the same time, I told Sam this earlier off camera, I don't want to feel like we're rushing through topics so that we can talk about the appropriate number of things. I think it's really healthy to dialogue back and forth between among these various topics. So Sam, I just wanted to maybe give you before we get into this straight off, let me just say, listen, Sam and I are both in our mid-30s. We're white guys. We don't have any idea what it's like to be a black person in America. We are not, we're not trying to start any kind of war about any of this. Please take our opinions for just a grain of salt for what they are. And you said something interesting earlier, Sam, about like, well, I don't know if we need to be talking, about, these kind of things as just another couple white guys on the block. And I think that's fair, but at the same time, I would rather see people just in general have conversations. Yes, neither one of us is black, but neither one of us is Asian, and neither one of us is any other race other than white. We certainly have our background will influence maybe what we think or what we say. I dislike the idea of thinking that those topics are off limits. For sure, we want to hear from people of color about how these events affect them and what they think, but I don't want to get in a world where we're excluded from talking about things just based on the color of our skin. So I might just say that up front. We're not trying to incite any kind of aggression here. We're simply just trying to learn and understand and talk through things. So I think that's really where I want to come from on this one. So Sam, is there anything in particular you want to say first about what's been going on and specifically the events surrounding George Floyd?
Sure. So it's been, I mean, well, I mean, obviously, as everyone knows, mixed with COVID and quarantine and lots of other things. It's been a very kind of surreal past, like, I mean, 5 weeks, 6 weeks or so since kind of the convergence of COVID and the light being shown back on Black Lives Matter movement, basically since the George Floyd the murder of George Floyd. As soon as I don't kind of get that out there from where I sit on it. It's interesting. I lived in St. Paul, part of the Twin Cities, for a couple of years. Obviously, I'm not claiming in any way to be an expert of what it's like to live in Minnesota, but I've been there. And I worked at a school while I was there, a very, very, diverse school, but also a failing school. And it's a really, really interesting social dynamic in that city. I didn't, I had some access to what it was like. There's a huge, and not a lot of people know this, maybe they know a little bit more now about it, just a huge, not just immigrant population, but a refugee population out there. Again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to just talk outside of the George Floyd statement, but just kind of my background a little bit with the area, Hmong people, Somali people, it's a very, very racially diverse place, and a place that's kind of, from the outsider view perspective, is kind of associated with being just really white. I would think is kind of the standard view of what people would think of when they think of Minnesota as a non-Minnesotan, right? Is they think of really nice white people. And it's so to see that happen there, and having seen how much struggle there was in the school that I taught at, that was a high school, really low graduation rate because it had such a high percentage of refugee population, ESL population. It's really kind of it's both. It's a good thing that that light is being shown on a place that maybe most people in the United States would never have thought that there was these kind of issues. Mm-hmm. That's usually associated with the Deep South. When people instantly they think of racism and such, and issues with the dynamics of race. A lot of times we think of Alabama, we think of Mississippi, we think of Georgia. Right. To see somewhere that has such a long, and as we were, this has come out since then, such a drawn out difficult experience with segregation in the city, issues with the police force in regard to the especially the Black population, but just, the population in general, has been really, really, really positive, but also kind of sad that it takes something as kind of horrifying as, what happened to George Floyd and that video and everything that came with it. I've been lucky enough. I've had some issues. I've come across times with police before, and I've gotten pulled over, and I've gotten out of it out of issues where I maybe shouldn't have 100%, because I was a white guy living in an upper middle class area, and I know for a fact that if I wasn't me in that moment, things would have gone worse, I would presume. The situation from then, the focus again, it's felt a little bit different this time. I think, maybe that's the continued sophistication, for better and for worse, of social media. But I think it's also, I don't know how, whatever you feel about the general thoughts of police brutality, the general thoughts of whether there's an issue with police on crime, on, violence towards Black people in general. However you feel about that, you couldn't watch that video, I don't think, and not just be like, what is going on? How can something like this occur and there not just be total consensus that this is outrageous?
Right.
And, the story cycle comes out, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to run too long, but the story cycle comes out, it's the typical stuff, yeah, but what was wrong with him? What was wrong with George Floyd? Had he been in trouble before? What was he doing then? He tried to counterfeit a $20 bill, etc. Focusing on these things, which, okay, if you want to use that for context, that's fine. But I don't know what kind of context we can provide that could change the fact that when you watch a video like that of murder, in my eyes, how you can sit there and just go, okay, like, this situation alone, and the fact that like people are like coming out, and you have to believe their voices when they're just like, this isn't new, this isn't surprising. Like, people can be the fact that like I'm horrified, and and I feel like I'm pretty up to date. I try to read and keep this up. I'm horrified, and there's other people who are less coming out, especially people from the Black community who are stating like they're not so much horrified as just like, well, they're horrified that we're horrified, because they're like, oh, you didn't know this was happening? This happens all the time. It's just we caught him this time. And I don't know. It's been very, very interesting to see it pop up. It's still going on, by the way. It's obviously protests are still happening. They've kind of fallen out of the news cycle, which is unfortunately almost inevitable with anything nowadays. But they're still going on. It feels different, but now it's starting to not feel different because of the fact that, like I just said, it fell out of the news cycle. Yeah, I mean, it's sad. I think this was the main thing I took out of it initially, was that I'm just sad. It made me just sad about how things are. Sad about that, came from a city I used to live in. Sad that it feels like it truly is everywhere, in some capacity. And, and sad now a little bit, because I was really hopeful. It inspired me to do some more reading, to do, watch, like go back and watch, movies. And I know this is just like, it's just a movie that you need to do more than that. But, seeing like a film like 13th on Netflix, talking again about the focus on the 13th Amendment and, the having to do with the difficulties of policing, especially with having to do with African Americans and the kind of like legal slavery that's come from that. Starting to read more books. I think if anything, obviously that doesn't do a lot, but it's positive that it's inspired people to research more, to learn more.
Sure.
And now it's just whether or not that actually leads to anything. I'm unfortunately a little dubious that it will, but it's yeah, I don't know. It's I felt a lot more optimistic 2 weeks ago than I do right now about it. That it just feels like it's just gonna have some superficial changes, and then it's going to blow away with the wind when the next big thing happens as we move towards an election. So I don't know. I'm sorry, a little rambly on that idea.
I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say, I think I have a couple thoughts. Number one, I want to state very clearly, along with, I think, any reasonable person, am horrified by the events surrounding the murder of George Floyd. I want to state that very clearly. I think it is a terrible thing that has happened, and I am not going to try to present some argument that he had this coming to him, or will look at his past. Like we've been talking about both in this episode and last week, I really want to focus on individual liberty. One of the benefits that is conferred to you by being an American citizen is that you should not be subject to this kind of treatment. It does not matter the color of your skin. I think the actions of Derek Chauvin are completely deplorable. I think he's a complete scumbag. I don't care what the policy says regarding anything. I mean, if you have not watched this video, I would implore you to watch it. It's a very difficult watch. It's 8 minutes and 46 seconds of this man kneeling on his neck. No matter how else you want to spin the story surrounding anything, there is no excuse for that. And maybe one piece of encouragement I would say to those of you who are on the left politically, again, like I was saying earlier, I mainly follow folks on the political right anyway. I get a lot of I get a lot of viewpoints from that side of politics, and not a single person that I follow or listen to or I'm interested in, not a single one is making any disparaging remark trying to defend the actions of Derek Chauvin. Not a single one. Across the board, it is complete denouncement. It is a terrible tragedy. It is horrifying, And I feel pretty comfortable saying that is the consensus of the mainstream political right. Obviously, there are people beyond that, fringe folks, which maybe we'll get into in part two when we talk about more recent stories. But if I can offer one piece of encouragement, is that at least from what I see, there is nobody who has a serious platform that is taken seriously, that is making the case that this is a justified killing. Nobody. Mm-hmm. And I think that's good. I think that's a good thing. Not to defend the actions of the political right or these commentators in specific, but I think you can see it for what it is. And I think this is also why I feel like I'm so focused on liberty and your constitutional rights, because it does not matter. It doesn't matter if this man had literally just killed somebody and they witnessed it. It does not give you the right as a police officer to treat a citizen in that manner. That's why I believe in due process. That's why I am very pleased to see that these officers were arrested. But on the same token, I also believe that Derek Chauvin should have his day in court. And that is such a difficult thing to say. I think your values mean very little if you don't stand up for them when it is the most difficult. And as much as I detest the actions of that police officer, I'm not particularly willing to execute him tomorrow. I think we need to go through the legal process. And I've heard some interesting takes on this from different folks. One of them is from Sam. Are you familiar with Brett Weinstein?
I know the name.
Yeah. So just as a super quick primer, Brett Weinstein is a self-described politically progressive evolutionary biologist. He was on faculty at Evergreen State College in Washington, and this was a few years ago. There was an incident where, I guess, on an ongoing basis, the college had I think they called it a day of absence, where people of color would just not come to campus to show solidarity for different mistreatments and historical injustices. They would just not show up to campus, and so they. I believe it was 2017, if I remember correctly. There was this movement to flip that kind of on its head, so that instead of people of color not coming to campus, it was that they tried to bar white people from campus. So only people of color can be on campus, and everybody else. I don't think it was you can't come, but they were trying to say don't come. So Brett Weinstein, a white gentleman, professor on staff there, again progressive politically. Said, there's a big difference between choosing to excuse yourself from the campus for a day and trying to bar other people from campus. And so he kind of tried to resist a little bit. And he was basically lambasted for this. There's some really scary video of a group of students confronting him in a building on campus, surrounding him, refusing to let him leave. And if anybody's interested, look into the events surrounding Evergreen and Brett Weinstein. Eventually, the long-term implications were that he reached a settlement with the school and he's no longer on faculty, him and his wife, who was also a faculty member there. Anyway, he's one of these people that, we're not on the same side of this political spectrum. He's definitely on the left. As we saw on the compass earlier, I'm on the right. But I really enjoy listening to him. He's a very intelligent person. And he made the case on an interview I saw with him for, are you 100% sure you saw a murder there? Is it actually 100%? And he said, he's echoing all the same sentiments that we're talking about. He's disgusted with this. And he's saying, even despite all of that, he's not willing to cede the fact that we should convict Derek Chauvin in the court of public opinion, that is very un-American to him, that we have decided that we have this legal system. You are afforded the right of due process to have your day in court. And he actually expressed nervousness about, what if, let's go theoretical for a second. What if theoretically, hypothetically speaking, this actually was not a murder and there were other events? There's a lot of misinformation, I would say, floating around surrounding, like, did he have a heart condition? Are there other things going on? I'm not trying to justify any of that. None of that takes away from the fact that what we saw was completely detestable. But what if it comes back that he actually, if he's acquitted, I guess, of this crime, and he's expressing his, this severe anxiety surrounding what the fallout would be, and it's maybe even less like go super high level theoretical on this. Maybe not even George Floyd, but just take this idea of someone who seems so clearly in the wrong, and then basically he will be martyred, not martyred, sacrificed by a jury of his peers because of how strong the I suppose the protests are. And again, these are the opinions of Brett Weinstein, and his point was that is not the way we do things in America, and there is something worth fighting for in terms of due process, regardless. And obviously, let me be clear, even if George Floyd committed a crime, he is in no way deserving of what happened to him. And he was also denied his right, his constitutional right, to be treated as an American citizen and to have due process applied to him. And so one of the questions on the political compass test was sort of like, I don't know if you saw this one, Sammy. It was like, do you believe an eye for an eye? Whatever, sort of the that old axiom. I think my answer was no, largely because, there are possibly my religious implications, convictions might come in on that one, but I think due process needs to take its course, and just in general. Again, I'm very disgusted with Derek Chauvin and the police officers that were a part of that arrest, and I would like to see them rot in jail or possibly executed, depending on what your feelings are on, state-sponsored capital punishment. But I don't know. So, that's my general take on it. Do you have any reaction to any of that, Sam?
So, not having seen the either the talk or the article that you're referencing from Brett Weinstein, I will say I think a big part of what's tied into this as well, and which I think is now being spread around so much about that with the Black Lives Matter movement in general, and if you want to reference all the other the inexhaustible list of names to be pulled out, whether it's the situation also with Breonna Taylor right now, with those three individuals who have not been brought in, to whether they should be jailed and tried and such. It keeps coming back again with just like, yes, I agree. I think everybody should be afforded their day in court, which, like you said, they did not afford Mr. Floyd. But I think that the fear is, and I think this is very, very true, is that there is probably a higher percentage of the population than maybe would be openly to admit it, give people in a role such as a police officer the benefit of the doubt. Is that job stressful? Is that job dangerous? Of course. It is unimaginably so. I would never and have no desire to ever do a job such as that. And all that comes with that. But I think the fear is that, like, a person such as Derek Chauvin is going to be afforded probably more benefit of the doubt in a situation like that than, say, if even if the same colors, non-police, if four white, or there's an Asian guy involved as well, so I apologize, but if four non-black people had surrounded one black man, tackled him on the ground, and these were just day-to-day human beings, non-police civilians, and one of them had stood on the black guy's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and then he died, I would guess pretty definitively, outrage or not, that that person would probably 100% could be convicted from it. I'm, if anything, think his day in court that Derek Chauvin is going to probably get more benefit of the doubt than he deserves, even with all the outrage, because of the fact that police officers are given a kind of pass, it seems like, from the situation, which I think is a big part of what people have issue with the whole situation,
Right.
is this kind of not infallibility of it, but
To me, it's the authoritarian. You are a police officer, you're conferred authority, and I am very suspect of that authoritarian control of the state.
I don't know a lot of people who are police officers. I know a few, and I've known people who wanted to be. So I can't speak from a lot of personal interactions with other people who have done that job and or have family members who have done that job. I will say it doesn't seem to be as rigorous of an acceptance process as one would think, with the amount of authority that is given to such a position.
I agree.
And again, now maybe I'm talking a little bit on my ass, but it's a heck of a lot harder to be a teacher than it is to get a job as a police officer, and that doesn't make it. I mean, well, maybe that makes sense. I'm sorry, I don't mean to compare those two, but like the amount of like schooling and education, and I'm not saying they don't get trained. I'm not saying they don't do that, but there is just, you have to go into debt and go to college and go to all these courses for years of your life to be a teacher, to be in the medical profession. Or a doctor is a great way to example. You are dealing with someone's life every day, whether it's an ER doctor or not. A police officer, you are dealing with a person's life every day. Every day. Just your decisions, you are carrying a gun. You are, by that action alone, you have the power and authority, though and the benefit of the doubt to utilize your weapon. Now, can you do it incorrectly and go to jail and et cetera for it? Of course. But like, you are afforded that opportunity that most people don't have, and you take that day to day, and the amount of training and necessary oversight seems like it's far less than just about any other profession. And again, I'm speaking a little bit in generalities, but
so let's do this, Sam. We're already over an hour here.
Can't help it.
This is a huge topic. I want to spend more time coming back to this. I think there's a lot of other areas we can go with this, specifically as it relates to like police unions and what is the role of the police. And there's a lot of people talking about defunding the police and all these different things. I think these are all worthwhile topics to discuss. Let's put a pin in it for now, and maybe we can revisit. And we're gonna go ahead and end here for part one. I do hope you'll join us for part two, which we're gonna record right after this, but we might upload it a day or so later. So
takes are gonna get even spicier.
It sure is. All right, folks. We'll speak to you soon.